mechanistic, as if nature functioned like a clock. You take it apart, reduce it to a number of small, simple pieces, easy to understand, analyze them, put them all back together again, and then you understand the whole.
Isn't that what's known as scientific thinking, Miss Hoffman? Really? What you call the mechanistic view, isn't that what the scientific method's all about?
Is it?
Well, I don't think so, but I'd like to kind of hear from the physicist, Jack.
All right, I'm sorry. Please continue.
Well, you're right in a way, Mr.
Jack. Call me Jack.
Okay, Jack. You are right in a sense. But it wasn't always so. Not before Descartes. When he introduced such thinking, it amounted to a revolutionary break with the church. He said, I don't need the Pope to tell me how the world functions. I can find that out for myself. Because to me, the world is just a machine. And then he became fascinated with clockworks and made the clock into a central metaphor. He said, I consider the human body as nothing but a machine. A healthy man is like a well-made clock. A sick man is like an ill-made clock.
Well, the metaphor seems a little clumsy now, but it worked, didn't it?
Yes, so successfully that scientists came to believe that all living things, plants, animals, us, are nothing but machines. And that's the fallacy. It carried over into everything, arts, politics.
I don't know, it seems to me that most people don't even remember who Descartes was. I'm sorry, I guess I just don't follow you.
But he'd like to. If you could just break it down into 30-second media bites, that's more what he's used to.
Very funny. All right, what is it that I don't recognize? What's so bad about Descartes?
But there's nothing bad about Descartes. In fact, I think Descartes is wonderful. He was a godsend to the 17th century. But times have changed since then. We need a new way of understanding life. That pendulum, for example, has long since been replaced by a tiny quartz crystal. And these magnificent hand-forged wheels turned into a microchip the size of my thumbnail. That's how far modern science has left mechanistic thinking behind. But you politicians, you seem to have that clockwork still ticking in your head. Well, let's take the population problem, for example. You can't solve it by looking at different forms of birth control in isolation. Research has proven again and again that the most effective form of birth control is not a pill. It's economic and social gains which will reduce the desire for large families.
That's true.
Do you know that in our world, every day 40,000 children die from malnutrition and preventable diseases? That's every other second. It's now, and now. But the short lives of these children cannot be seen in isolation. They're part of a whole system involving the economics, involving the environment, and more specifically, involving high levels of third world debt.
How's that?
The burden of frenzied borrowing is not falling on those with foreign bank accounts, nor on those who created the imbalance. The burden is falling on the already deprived. 3 years ago, President Nyerere asked the question, must we starve our children to pay our debts? That question has been answered in practice. And the answer has been yes, because since he asked, hundreds and thousands of little children in the third world have given their lives to pay their country's debts. And millions more are still paying interest with their malnourished minds and bodies. Take Brazil. Do you know that they are destroying the Amazon rainforest at the rate of 1 football field a second? Now. Why? They're trying to pay their national debts with cattle and land speculation. They don't even have time to sell the timber, so they're setting fire to the woods. And our barren forests are one of the main causes of the global warming, the greenhouse effect. And in the meantime, we are pouring our money into the arms race. See, you cannot look at one single of our global problems in isolation, trying to understand it and solve it. Of course, you can fix a fragment of a piece, but it will deteriorate a second later because what it was connected to has been ignored. We have to change everything together at the same time. The ideals, the institutions, the values.
All of this sounds kind of familiar. Do you two know each other? Is this a setup? Well, all right. What do I think of this? Yes, the problems are complex, but you're just looking at the dark side because so's our capacity to respond, isn't it? Communications, data banks, technology. We already have the tools to deal with a lot of these problems, even if they are more complex.
Candide himself, the eternal optimist.
But don't you see that all these new technologies, they're causing more problems than they solve? In medicine, for example, there's been an overwhelming increase in technology, but the costs have spiraled concurrently. It's become medicine for the rich. And public health hasn't improved significantly, although public health would improve dramatically if we just changed our eating habits, for example. But instead, the experts are occupied with making artificial hearts. But if our agribusiness had fed us better instead of chopping down the rainforests in order to make cattle ranches, in order to produce more and more red meat, which is one of the direct causes of heart attacks, then maybe we wouldn't have to spend so much of our money on artificial hearts, and so on and so on. Well, this is all examples of interconnectedness.
But Sonia... All right, supposing that you're right and everything is connected to everything else, as you say. Still, you've got to start somewhere, don't you? So that's the real political question here. Where do you start?
By changing the way we're seeing the world. You see, you're still searching for the right piece to fix first. You don't see that all the problems simply are fragments of one single crisis, a crisis of perception.
Oh, good. The world is coming to an end, and you say it's a crisis of perception. I'm sorry, that's a little abstract for me. And all of this stuff about modern medicine, all your criticisms. I mean, I may be a doctor's son, but you have to admit that this mechanistic medicine has been pretty successful.
Well, up to a point. But simply by blocking the mechanisms of a disease doesn't mean healing it. I mean, it's like in politics. It's just shifting the problem to another sphere.
Are you going to help me in this, or are you going to leave me stranded out here in this argument by myself?
I'm going to leave you stranded. I'm going to leave you stranded.
Okay. A person goes to a doctor today with recurring attacks of gallstones, and the doctor takes the gallbladder out, and lo and behold, the pain goes away. Now, you could say that the doctor is working from a poor perceptual model, that he just concentrated on a part of the clock that wasn't working and removed it. But the fact is, the patient is out of his pain, he's feeling better, and the clock is ticking again. His perceptual model worked.
But is everything that works good for the system?
Oh, come on, Sonia, that's disingenuous and not at all useful when applied to politics, which is, after all, a system that is based on people. It's the art of bringing people to agree on a certain course of action. If that course of action succeeds, the people are satisfied. If not, they're not. It's as simple as that. If it works, it's good, period.
Isn't that exactly what you said, why politics doesn't work anymore? That politics, you said, needed to become the art of the impossible?
Whose side are you on?
Hers, obviously. She's intelligent, gracious, and she's more attractive.
Listen, Jack, I'd like to get back to the systems. You know, you called me dishonest.
No.
Yeah? Let's talk about the gallbladder again. Let's say the gallbladder is out and the pain is gone. But what about the stress that might have brought the illness on? If that stress persists, he's probably going to get sick again. Or let's say he had changed his nutrition much earlier and done some exercise. He may never have developed the gallstones in the first place. See, a little health education might have been much cheaper than the operation. A lot less painful, too. But our systems, doesn't encourage prevention, it encourages intervention.
Okay, you're not disingenuous, but to blame all this on a French philosopher who's been dead for 300 years, isn't that a little out of proportion? Maybe even a little eccentric?
No. Not if I'm right. See, my point isn't to condemn Descartes' thinking. It's simply to recognize its limitations. Might have been extremely useful to perceive the world as a machine for 300 years, but that perception today is not only inaccurate, it's actually harmful. We need a new vision of the world.
So, Sonia, life's a bunch of probability patterns running around. Probability patterns of what?
Of interconnections.
What?
Well, what I'm trying to say is that these probabilities are not probabilities of things, but probabilities of interconnections.
See, Jack, that's what she was trying to tell you.
See, we tend to think of subatomic particles as some kind of small billiard balls or small grains of sand. But for physicists, a particle has no independent existence. A particle is essentially a set of relations that reach outward to connect with other things.
What are those other things, please?
They are interconnections of yet other things, which also turn out to be interconnections, and so on and so on. You see, in atomic physics, we never end up with any things at all. The essential nature of matter lies not in objects, but in interconnections.
Everybody knows the chord. It's a third, the most basic of harmonies. Carries with it a very distinctive feeling, no? And yet, its individual notes carry none of that feeling. Therefore, the essence of the chord lies in relationships. And the relationship between time and pitch
Makes melody.
makes melody. Relationships make music.
Relationships make matter,
Music of the spheres.
as Kepler said.
And Shakespeare before him.
And Pythagoras before him. Now, this vision of a universe arranged in harmonies of sounds and relations is no new discovery. Today, physicists are simply proving that what we call an object, an atom, a molecule, a particle, is only an approximation, a metaphor. At the subatomic level, it dissolves into a series of interconnections, like chords of music. It's beautiful.
Yeah, but there are boundaries, aren't there? I mean, between you and me, for instance. We are two separate bodies, aren't we? That's not an illusion. Is it? Are you saying that there is actually a physical connection between you and me and between you and the wall behind you and the air and this bench?
Yes. At the subatomic level, there is a continual exchange of matter and energy between my hand and this wood, between the wood and the air, and even between you and me. I mean, a real exchange of photons and electrons. Ultimately, whether we like it or not, we're all part of one inseparable web of relationships.
Sure, you're not a secret lover of dictatorships, but wouldn't it take some kind of totalitarian regime to put ideas as comprehensive as yours into effect? So, how does all this translate into politics, or doesn't it? Is this just going to be the best conversation I've had in months, or is there still a chance you can get me elected president? That's what I'd like to know.
Jack, you're still asking me for a program. I'm trying to make you embrace a vision. But you just want to know what the packaging is.
I'm a practical man. I'm from Missouri.
I thought you were from the East Coast.
That's an expression. It means show me.
Devising policies, that's your job. I do think that as long as you continue looking at things through that old patriarchal Cartesian Newtonian lens, you're gonna miss out on what the world really is. You, we, all of us, we need a new vision of the world, and we need a more comprehensive, more inclusive science to support us. There is a new theory emerging now, which places all the ecological concepts we've been talking about into one coherent scientific framework. We call it systems theory. The theory of living systems.
Living systems?
Mm-hmm. All living organisms, as well as social systems and ecosystems. See, this theory would help us get a much firmer grasp on the sciences that deal with life.
Are these all your own ideas, or do other people share them? I mean, has this been applied in the sciences anywhere?
Am I a crank? It's okay, Senator. This is real science. And many scientists, including some Nobel laureates, have been working on these ideas. Prigozhin, Bateson, Maturana, just to mention a few. Yes, it is science, but of a new kind. Instead of concentrating on basic building blocks, the systems view concentrates on principles of organization. Instead of cutting things to pieces, it looks at the living system as a whole.
How can you think usefully about things in this holistic way? That's what I don't see. You can contemplate them, you can look at them, as Thomas says. But if you want to do something, if you want to get into specifics, by definition, don't you have to take things apart? How can you talk usefully about a tree without talking about its roots or its leaves or its bark?
Well, I could, without even naming the parts you mentioned. Well, a Cartesian would look at a tree and conceptually take it to pieces. But then he would never really understand the nature of the tree. A systems thinker would look at a tree and see the seasonal exchange between tree and earth, earth and sky. Would see the annual cycle, which really is one big breath the earth takes through its forests, providing us with oxygen, a breath of life, linking the earth with the sky and us with the universe. A systems thinker would look at the tree and see the life of the tree only in relation to the life of the whole forest. Would see the tree as a habitat for birds, a home for insects. But if you look at a tree and try to understand it as something separate, you will be bewildered by the millions of fruits it's producing in its lifetime, because only 1 or 2 trees will grow from those fruits. So if you look at the tree and see it as a member of a larger living system, that abundance of fruits will make sense, because hundreds upon hundreds of forest animals and birds will survive because of them. Interdependence. And the tree cannot survive on its own either. To draw water from the ground, it needs the fungus that grows at the tip of each root. And the fungus needs the root to survive, and the root needs the fungus. If one dies, the other dies. And there are millions of relationships like this in our world, each depending on each other for life. The systems theory recognizes this web of relationships as the essence of all living things. Only the uninformed would call such a notion naive or romantic. Because this dependency we all share is a scientific fact.
A web of relationships.
Yes, but this time it is the web of life itself.